My sister's housewarming party became a bigger priority for my parents than my wedding. This decision came about because I had chosen not to invite Vicky, my sister, after she punched me. As a result, instead of having my parents walk me down the aisle on my special day, my grandparents are stepping in to take on that role. For a long time, I have felt the weight of a truth that always lingered in the background. My parents favored my older sister Vicky over me. She was the child they had planned for, while I was a surprise, an unexpected pregnancy that came just 10 months later. It often felt like I was the uninvited guest in my own family, brought into a world that perhaps my parents didn't even want at first. They chose to keep the pregnancy, but it always felt like I was an afterthought. My mom's parents had already passed away before I was born, which meant that my dad's parents played a vital role in my upbringing. Grandma and Grandpa filled my life with love and support, something I often felt was missing from my own parents. I have fond memories of spending time with my grandparents. However, as I grew older, I realized it was unjust that they would take Vicky along for trips while I was left behind. At first, when I was younger, I enjoyed the time I spent with my grandparents, but around the ages of 6 or 7, the unfairness started to become clearer to me. I began to recognize that my feelings of being unwanted were not just about my parents. My sister Vicky contributed to this sense of exclusion as well. I had no real resentment toward her, but she made it very clear that she saw me as an interloper in our family dynamic. Every day felt like a reminder of my status as the lesser sibling. Vicky and I engaged in a constant competition for everything, whether it was grades, attention from our parents, or even the smallest achievements. This never-ending contest left me feeling inferior, as if I was forever in her shadow. Our relationship felt more like a rivalry than a sisterly bond, with her always emerging victorious. I recall one specific incident that encapsulated our sibling rivalry. Vicky wanted to be friends with a group of girls but was hesitant to approach them due to her nerdy reputation. Since I shared an art class with one of those girls, I was introduced to the group, and we instantly connected. However, this only fueled Vicky's jealousy. She insisted that I talk to our parents about including her in our hangouts, and in an effort to keep the peace, I reluctantly did. Vicky struggled to fit in with the girls, often coming off as overly eager and intrusive, despite her genuine intentions. The awkwardness between her and the other girls was always palpable. On one occasion, she tried to help one of the girls by talking to a boy she liked. Unfortunately, he found it amusing and shared her feelings with everyone else, leaving that girl humiliated. Following that incident, the group of girls firmly told me they didn't want Vicky joining us anymore. I reluctantly agreed, but Vicky's reaction was explosive. She threw a fit and went to our parents, insisting I shouldn't hang out with those mean girls either, arguing that I should support her as her sister. However, I stood my ground and pointed out that it was her behavior that led to the situation. My parents, as usual, took her side. They lectured me about how Vicky meant no harm and urged me to mend things between her and the girls. They even suggested that if the girls refused to accept Vicky, I should cut ties with them. But I firmly maintained my stance. I valued my friendships too much to jeopardize them for my sister. I told my parents I had done enough and it was not my responsibility to make friends for her. This led to immense frustration from them, including weeks of silent treatment directed at me. Nevertheless, I felt proud of my decision. The group of girls I chose to remain friends with has continued to be in my life, and they feel like family. With them, I have shared countless moments of joy and sadness, forming bonds that I cherish deeply. I have shared countless experiences with them, moments filled with laughter and tears that have shaped some of the most significant times in my life. Yet, during those challenging moments, I found it incredibly difficult to remain steadfast in my decision to prioritize my own happiness over what others, especially Vicky, wanted from me. Doubt would sometimes creep in, leading me to question whether I had truly made the right choice in putting my own needs first. This internal struggle was not the sole reason for the growing animosity Vicky felt toward me. Another incident contributed to her feelings of resentment. There was a boy whom Vicky had a crush on, someone I was completely unaware of at the time. He and I were friends and would sit together in some of our classes, developing a camaraderie that was innocent and platonic. At one point, he approached me to ask me to the junior prom. I politely declined because I had already made plans to go with someone else I liked. When Vicky discovered this, she erupted in fury, causing quite a scene. She accused me of always taking the things she wanted and claimed that I had been flirting with him for months, which was not true. In a fit of anger, she resorted to name-calling, using hurtful words that no sister should ever say to another. She even expressed her wish that I was not her sister, a statement that cut deep. To complicate matters further, my mother sided with Vicky, expressing her disappointment and telling me it was wrong of me to disregard the unspoken girl code. I tried to defend myself, explaining that I had no romantic interest in the boy and had turned him down, leaving Vicky free to pursue him if she wanted. But Vicky was unrelenting. She seemed to need to direct her frustration at me, possibly knowing deep down that the boy would have likely rejected her, too. In a rare moment of bonding, my dad took me out for ice cream, hoping to spend some quality father-daughter time together. As unusual as this was, I was grateful for the attention. However, the conversation took an unexpected turn as he began asking me some very personal questions. He wanted to know if my boyfriend and I were being careful, if he came from a good family, and whether we were using drugs. I was shocked by the sudden intensity of his questions and asked what had prompted such worries. It was then that my dad revealed that Vicky had been telling stories for months, crafting a narrative that I was involved in drugs and alcohol with my boyfriend. This was a complete fabrication, a lie that I quickly disproved by showing him my phone to clarify the truth. When my dad confronted Vicky about her claims, she tried to justify her actions by saying that no one our age simply hangs out with a guy without some hidden agenda and that I was hiding secrets from everyone. This was infuriating to me, and I confronted her about creating unnecessary drama. I reminded her that it wasn't my fault she had no one to date and insisted she should stay out of my life. Vicky didn't take my words well at all. In an unexpected outburst, she punched me. This was particularly shocking because she had never shown any physical aggression before. The blow caused my nose to bleed, and I collapsed to the ground, clutching my face in pain. My parents rushed me to the emergency room, pleading with me the entire time not to file a police report against Vicky. They insisted that doing so would ruin her life. Meanwhile, I sat in the back seat, hurting, while Vicky showed no concern for what had happened nor did she offer an apology. Later, when a nurse in the emergency room asked about my injury, I felt compelled to tell her the truth. As a result, she contacted Child Protective Services, CPS. My parents were furious with me for bringing CPS into our family matters, viewing it as a betrayal of our family loyalty. In their eyes, Vicky's actions were dismissed as a mere accident, an isolated incident that should not warrant such drastic measures. They argued with CPS, insisting that Vicky posed no danger to me and that her behavior was out of character. Ultimately, Vicky was not held accountable, but the authorities did issue a warning to my parents, stating they would keep an eye on our family situation in case any further incidents arose. Understandably, the entire situation left Vicky shaken, and it equally distressed my parents. They later expressed their disappointment in me, claiming I was attempting to ruin my sister's life. My mother cried, telling me that I was tearing our family apart by involving outsiders. My father's disappointment was palpable as he questioned my decision to escalate the situation. I stood firm in my feelings, telling them that I wanted Vicky out of my life. Although I felt a pang of guilt for involving the authorities, I believed it was necessary for my safety. The decision to involve the authorities weighed heavily on my conscience. However, for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of safety within my own home. After Vicky received a formal warning from the authorities, my parents had a separate conversation with her. Following that day, she completely stopped speaking to me, and I was relieved. I preferred this sudden silence over her constant presence and her attempts to intrude into my life. When my grandparents learned about what had happened, they asked me to pack my bags so that I could stay with them for the rest of high school. They spoke to my parents about it, who did not object much to the plan. Soon after, I left my parents' house and moved in with my grandparents. This new environment was a stark contrast to my previous living situation. Here, I felt safe and loved, which allowed me to focus on my studies and enjoy my final days of high school. I created wonderful memories with my friends during that time. In the months that followed, my parents never reached out to me. They didn't visit or call, and I understood that they were content with their favorite daughter, Vicky. Even though it hurt to think they could so easily dismiss me, I didn't try to contact them. I had accepted that I had become a stranger in their eyes. When graduation day arrived, my parents came only to cheer for Vicky. They didn't acknowledge my achievements or even congratulate me, which stung deeply. It felt as though I was invisible to them. Fortunately, my grandparents were there that day. They confronted my parents about their obvious favoritism, which brought me some comfort. I was unsure about what my grandfather said, but I later noticed my father awkwardly approaching me to offer his congratulations. Around that time, I received the fantastic news that I had been accepted into a good college with a full scholarship. I was overjoyed, especially since I had dreaded asking my parents for any financial assistance. I shared this news with my grandparents, and they celebrated with me by taking me out to a nice restaurant for dinner. After our meal, my grandmother posted pictures of me on her Facebook account, proudly writing about how exceptional she considered me as a student. Relatives soon caught wind of my achievements and sent their congratulations. Some may have even contacted my parents, who seemed completely unaware of the situation. The next day, however, my mother called me with distressing news. She informed me that Vicky was locked in her room, crying because she hadn't been accepted to any colleges. My mother accused me of purposely trying to make Vicky feel bad about her grades by discussing my success with our relatives. She placed the blame squarely on me, claiming I had pushed my sister into poor academic performance and that Vicky was now suffering from depression due to the earlier incident with Child Protective Services. Hearing my mother's accusations broke my heart. It hurt deeply to think she could shift responsibility onto me for Vicky's struggles. That call marked the last time I spoke to her for an extended period. My grandparents supported me through this challenging time and helped me move into my college dorm. My high school boyfriend and I had ended our relationship due to the distance between our colleges. I entered college single, ready to embrace a new chapter of my life filled with independence and determination. Though the breakup had its difficulties, I was excited about the prospect of meeting new people. It was then that I met Rob. We were both freshmen who spent countless hours in the library. Rob was unlike anyone I had ever known. His quiet demeanor and studious nature resonated with my own values, and we quickly bonded over our mutual love for academia. As the weeks turned into months, our friendship blossomed into something more profound. I found myself developing feelings for Rob that went beyond friendship. Being an extrovert, I was open about my feelings for Rob. To my surprise, he felt the same way. We began dating and have now been together for 8 incredible years. My grandparents have met Rob, and they absolutely adore him. I also had the chance to meet Rob's parents, who treat me as if I were their own daughter. On several occasions, Rob's mother has shared with me how she always wished for a daughter, expressing her joy that Rob found a wonderful partner in me. This is the first time in my life that I have been surrounded by family members who genuinely like me and do not resent me. I have shared my childhood stories with Rob, and he listens with empathy and understanding. Throughout these last 8 years, my life has transformed. I have found love, support, and a sense of belonging that I had longed for, and it has made all the difference in my journey towards happiness and fulfillment. For the past 8 years, my parents and I have had very little communication. They would occasionally send me a birthday text if they happened to remember, but that was the extent of our interaction. Recently, a significant event occurred in my life. Rob and I got engaged. He proposed to me during a trek to our special spot where we like to watch the sunrise. It was a magical moment. His nervousness when he asked the question was endearing, and I felt completely certain as I said yes. I shared pictures of our engagement on Instagram and also made sure to inform my grandparents, who were thrilled to hear the news. They congratulated us warmly and expressed their happiness for our future together. I suppose the news spread quickly because out of the blue, my parents called to congratulate me. Given our long period of silence, I expected a casual conversation. They asked about my life, my job, and my apartment. Then, surprisingly, my dad straightforwardly asked if he could walk me down the aisle. I was caught off guard by this sudden question, especially since he didn't even know where I worked just moments before. I responded that I hadn't really considered it yet, but he insisted that it would be embarrassing for me not to ask him, implying that others would question our decision if he weren't part of the ceremony. I laughed and told my parents that I wasn't sure if I was even going to invite them given our lack of contact over the years. Their reaction was immediate and intense. My mother was particularly upset, expressing her disappointment in my response. She talked about the importance of family and how they would always be my parents, regardless of our past. She urged me to let go of any lingering issues between us. Part of me felt inclined to listen to them. I wanted to heal our relationship. However, another part of me was hesitant, wary of being vulnerable again and risking more disappointment. As I was about to embark on this new chapter in my life, I ultimately decided to accept my dad's offer. He seemed genuinely happy, which made me feel a bit better about my choice. As wedding planning got underway, I reached out to my high school girlfriends, with whom I had maintained contact despite the distance caused by our careers. I conveyed how much I wanted to reunite and asked them if they would be my bridesmaids. Their responses were filled with joy and excitement, and they all accepted without hesitation. We planned a bachelorette party in Las Vegas, while Rob had his own celebration with his friends. We shared countless pictures from our party, and it was truly a fun experience for everyone involved. However, after returning home, my parents called once more, and this time, they expressed their disappointment over my decision not to include my sister, Vicky, in the bachelorette celebration. I firmly responded that there was no way I would invite her, as I no longer wished to have her in my life. This caught my parents off guard, and they pressed me for clarification. I explained that Vicky's past behavior, marked by deceit and betrayal, had left me feeling hurt and mistrustful. I couldn't imagine inviting her to such a personal and joyous occasion as my bachelorette party, knowing her presence would overshadow it with negativity. I also made it clear that this was the reason she would not be invited to my wedding either. My parents reacted strongly to my explanation, accusing me of having no right to exclude my sister from such important events. They told me it was my responsibility as her sister to include her, especially considering that Vicky was eagerly looking forward to reconnecting with me now that I was getting married. I was confused by their comments and questioned what had led her to believe she would be welcomed back into my life since we had barely spoken in years. My parents dismissed my concerns, insisting that I needed to reconsider my decision. My concern is that this situation is not how sisters should treat each other. I understand where my parents are coming from, but I had to explain to them that my relationship with Vicky is complicated. Given everything that has happened between us, I simply do not feel comfortable having her attend my wedding. Vicky has never once apologized for the things she has put me through, and that makes it even harder for me to see how she could play a part in such an important day for me. Despite my feelings, my parents, as they often do, dismissed my words. My mother kept insisting that she wanted what was best for the family and downplayed my concerns by saying inviting Vicky was not a big deal. My dad chimed in, saying that relatives would talk if Vicky did not come, and it would cast a negative light on my wedding. But I knew I had to stand my ground. I wasn't going to yield to their demands. I explained that I was okay with people gossiping and questioning my character as long as I was surrounded by people I truly liked and trusted during my wedding. That's what mattered most to me. In response, my mother asked if my fiancé would be okay with my decision. She went on about how my in-laws would see me as cruel for excluding my own sister. I couldn't help but laugh at that because I knew my fiancé and in-laws were already aware of my family dynamics, and they wouldn't care whether Vicky was there or not. My parents urged me to rethink my choice, stressing the importance of family unity and forgiveness. Nevertheless, I remained firm in my decision, unwilling to compromise my own well-being just to placate others. In the end, we agreed to disagree, with each of us holding on to our own viewpoints. My parents said they needed to think things over, and we ended the conversation. Afterward, I felt guilty for standing up to my parents, so I shared my feelings with my grandparents. They completely supported me, telling me that I should not feel obligated to invite anyone I didn't want there and that my parents were just trying to guilt-trip me, as usual. Since that conversation, I have felt somewhat better about my decision. I got wrapped up in wedding planning as the day was fast approaching. However, last week, my dad called me with news that shocked me. He told me he had thought about it a lot and that he and my mom would no longer be attending the wedding. Before I could even react, he added that this also meant he would not be walking me down the aisle. I asked him why they were making this choice, and he explained that Vicky was moving to a new place soon, and my parents had helped her find it. Since I was excluding her from my wedding, she had decided to hold a housewarming party on the same day, and they would be attending that instead of my wedding. A wave of shock and disbelief washed over me as I absorbed my father's words. The notion that my sister's housewarming party took priority over my wedding felt like a bitter pill to swallow. It deepened the hurt and sense of betrayal I had felt for years. I simply told him I understood and hung up the phone. While I tried to appear brave in front of my dad, the pain of rejection cut deeper than I could express. When I shared the news with Rob, he was furious about how insensitive my parents could be, especially since they had been the ones insisting they should be invited. He suggested that I ask my grandparents instead, as they had always been there for me more than my parents. I agreed with this idea and called my grandparents to see if they would be willing to walk me down the aisle at my wedding. As I spoke to them, tears welled up in my eyes. I was overcome with emotion at the thought of how much they meant to me. I told them, "You and Grandpa have always been there for me. You've been more than just grandparents, you've been like parents. I can't imagine anyone else I'd rather have by my side on my wedding day." Without hesitation, my grandparents agreed. They expressed how honored they would be to walk me down the aisle, filling my heart with gratitude and peace amidst the turmoil I had faced. They expressed how honored they would feel to walk me down the aisle. Unlike my own parents, who had disappointed me in the past, they assured me that they would be there for me on this significant day. Their kind words provided me with a sense of reassurance, and in that moment, I was enveloped in a deep feeling of peace and contentment. With my grandparents by my side, I felt a strong bond, knowing that I had a family who loved me unconditionally and accepted me completely, flaws and all. I also had a conversation with Rob's parents about the situation, and they were very supportive. They made it clear that they did not mind if my parents chose not to attend the wedding. Regardless of my parents' absence, they were excited to be there to witness and celebrate the union between Rob and me. As the day of my wedding approached, which was only 2 days away, I woke up to several missed calls from my dad. Concerned that it might be an emergency, I quickly called him back. When he answered, he asked me if it was true that my grandparents would be walking me down the aisle. I confirmed that it was indeed true. This led to an unexpected outburst from my dad, who criticized my decision and labeled it disrespectful to my grandparents. I reminded him that he was the one who had chosen not to attend my wedding, so I found it puzzling that he was upset now. My dad then began to yell, claiming that he and my mom were trying to make me realize the error of my ways. He believed that by declining the invitation, they were teaching me a lesson. He insisted that since he and my mom had raised me and supported my education, my grandparents had no right to take his place on such an important day. I tried to explain that my grandparents had been there for me in ways my parents never had, but my dad refused to listen. He continued to blame me, saying that I had alienated everyone and that all of this was my fault. After that conversation, I found myself questioning whether I had made a mistake by asking my grandparents to accompany me down the aisle. An update on the situation came as a surprise to me when I received numerous comments from people responding to my post. Many offered valuable advice and suggestions on how to handle the situation. I realized that I needed to consider cutting off my parents for good, as their constant back and forth was draining and negatively impacting my mental health. I did not want them in my life anymore since they had repeatedly shown that their priorities lay elsewhere. While I had known for a long time that my parents were selfish, the thought of completely severing ties was daunting. It is much easier to say a child should stop loving their parents than it is to actually do it. Nevertheless, for the sake of my mental peace and to enjoy my approaching wedding, it became necessary for me to take this step. Another update came after my wedding, which had kept me busy for the past month. I can happily say that the ceremony went wonderfully, with my grandparents proudly by my side as I walked down the aisle. Despite my parents' absence, I felt immense joy as I exchanged vows with Rob, committing to share our lives together. The celebration that followed was filled with dancing and laughter, reminding me of the importance of maintaining friendships from childhood. These friends can often become your chosen family. During the reception, I did feel a pang of sadness when I realized that my parents were missing from this special moment, especially as I watched Rob's parents and cousins sharing heartfelt speeches. However, I found comfort in knowing that I had made the best decision for myself by prioritizing my well-being and happiness. Some of my girlfriends took turns giving speeches, reminiscing about our shared experiences and the deep bond that had carried us through both the highs and lows in life. In the days after the wedding, Rob and I enjoyed our honeymoon, generously funded by his parents as a gift. Those days were spent relaxing and savoring our time together as a married couple. Each time I looked at Rob, I felt a joyful thrill at the realization that he was now my husband. As I had mentioned previously, I decided to cut ties with my parents completely by blocking them on all platforms. I felt no need to provide them with an explanation because, frankly, they did not deserve one. I have often wondered whether Vicky genuinely had a housewarming party on the day of my wedding or if it was simply an excuse for my parents to avoid attending. At this point, it hardly matters to me. I sincerely wish nothing but happiness for Vicky, her family, and their beloved daughter. In my last update, I mentioned that I wasn't planning to share anything more, but an unexpected event has occurred that I feel is important to share. For the last month, I have been so wrapped up in preparing for my wedding and enjoying my honeymoon that I didn't check my email. However, today, as I was sorting through the messages that had piled up, I stumbled upon an email from Vicky. The fact that she even found my email address surprised me. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to open her message or just delete it without reading it. Ultimately, my curiosity won out, and I decided to click on it. Inside the email was a long message from Vicky where she expressed her regret about the strained relationship we have had. She clearly acknowledged her past mistakes and admitted to being both selfish and immature at times. Vicky took the time to apologize for the hurt she has caused me over the years and showed a genuine desire to make things right. She went on to say how happy she is for me now that I am married and that she wishes me nothing but the best in the future. At the end of her email, she made a heartfelt plea, asking me not to cut off my parents completely because they miss me. As I read Vicky's words, I found myself experiencing a whirlwind of emotions. There was surprise, a hint of skepticism, and a glimmer of hope. Part of me wants to believe that she has truly changed, that her apology is sincere, and that she is willing to work towards mending our relationship. Yet, another part of me remains cautious since this all feels almost too good to be true. Regardless of her words, deep down, I know my parents don't truly miss me. If they did, I feel certain that they wouldn't have treated me the way they did over the years. I contemplated sending a reply to Vicky, but in the end, I chose not to respond immediately. Forgiveness is not something that should be rushed, it is a process that takes time and reflection. While I am uncertain if I am ready to forgive her yet, I also don't want to completely sever ties. After all, she did reach out to apologize for her actions. To be honest, since getting married, I no longer feel alone. I have discovered that I am surrounded by love and support. My husband stands by my side, I have caring friends who are there for me, and my grandparents offer me unwavering love. With this strong support system, I feel confident that I can face whatever challenges may come my way without needing Vicky or my parents in my life. Additionally, I have taken proactive steps toward healing. I researched and found a good therapist, and I have already scheduled my first appointment. This decision is motivated by my desire to address and resolve any lingering wounds from my past and to begin the process of healing completely.